I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I've heard so much about Tree, and I'm just really thrilled to be able to read here. And you have such an amazing open mic. That is the most concise, it's just, I've never seen it so well organized before. And I know my dad probably loved Pearl's poem about refugees. My dad is actually in the audience today from Saskatoon. He and my mom are helping me with my baby, who's screaming somewhere out in the city of Ottawa. So anyway, I loved all the poems that we just heard, and I'm very excited to share some of mine. This book, it's brand new. It's still funny to read these poems out of an actual book. I'm actually going to start things off with the first poem in the book, which actually takes place in Mexico. I lived there for 4 months with my sister and brother-in-law. My brother-in-law's Mexican, and at the time they were living on his family's orange farm. And so I went to stay with them for 4 months, partly to work on poetry, but also because I had just gotten out of a stupid relationship that was making me very sad, and I needed some color and some sunlight and some warmth. So this is called Prologue. Blend of heat and color. Bougainvillea bloom in January. Cacti buds are sunsets. Scrub dishes, stoke the fire, bring in wood, play a game of dominoes, help Salvador wash his car. Walk in the groves with the dogs, throw them pieces of orange, occupy restless hands. Salvador makes perfume. Fingers measure and pour the alcohol. The bottles smell like candy. Twice a week, the shrill siren of a tortilla truck passes through El Llano. Dogs have flies around their mouths. Women in television commercials are whiter than you are. Learn to say café con leche. This is what a woman's skin looks like. Think of a man once loved, planned a life with. Bike down a gravel switchback, launch head first over the handlebars. The bike on top, the sun, a frying pan branded to back. On Saturdays, the market in Montemorelos. Boiled corn mixed with salsa and crema fresca. Kids sell toy cars and Spider-Man dolls, cowboy belt buckles, silver purses and pink lipsticks. A scruffy one-eared dog trots by, nipples dragging like udders. Whoever sucks her dry gets a mouthful of dust. 50-cent bottles of beer are sweeter than milk. A man lifts iron bird cages out of a truck, glint of green-tipped wings, palomas, their muffled, throated coos. At the market, look for a mortar and pestle to grind chilies. On New Year's Eve in Monterey, eat pale cow intestines in gunpowder broth. Shots are heard all evening. Children set off firecrackers and twirl sparklers. The neighbors play mariachi until 6 a.m. A car alarm runs for hours before the battery gives out. Even in rain, no decisions are made. The dogs stay inside, except the ones at the baseball field, digging through wet leaves at the foot of the bleachers. Leave a beer bottle on the pitcher's mound, a bundle of roadside azaleas. Back at the house, cookbooks exasperate. No recipe for meatloaf. The rain pounding on the roof is worse than the hail of pecans let loose by the night wind. The cold and its contagion. Water moves toward a bed of cement, into a pool, the way mercury slides along kitchen tile, thermometer in shards. Stick hands in the meat, raw and slippery. Lupita next door calls Adrienne and gives little cakes to take home. Enrique's roosters claw the dirt. Always a cockroach beside the shoes, an exoskeleton. In the kitchen, a fire in a small, dark corner. Hold hands over until they blister. Outside, the dogs carry oranges like softballs in their mouths. There isn't anything to do but pass the time. Dangle feet in the irrigation water. Bougainvillea, hibiscus, buttered sunflowers. Dogs follow to the river. One finds a turtle and bats it around. I can't hold on to anything. So I spent last night in Perth with very close friends of my parents, which was wonderful. But I woke up this morning to this much snow, which really surprised me. So even though it melted by the afternoon, but I figure I should read at least one summer poem to make sure that we can hold on to some summer. And this is called "The Summer I Was Her Hedonist." One night she is determined to photograph me naked, guttural. Her cabin at the acreage, spread-eagled in her hatchback, kneeling behind the driver's seat, aperture sealed between thighs. Diffuse, shutter. The mirror opens, exposure. Our shadows stilted. The syntax of my back, slack shift, off kilter. The double helix of our mating. We produce nothing but the stick of the shutter. The blue-black filter of night licks the dim tungsten bulb that burns against the nervous corner. Would these photos tell us more about ourselves? Kaleidoscope-bound contortionists, the dream of us furrows its way into night. I'm going to read a poem about heartbreak, but it's not about my own heartbreak, which is kind of nice. It's called "The Planets Never Align for You." There's a quote by David Hickey that starts off the poem, and it's called. It reads, "The more furious the star, the brighter it burns." How furious you are with your heart and the sheer will of it to hold tight the crux of capillary function, the dank scent of iron, the dark that never left. Pump away. The hidden spool of arteries foil even the best of us. The fossil corked from the chest. You have never felt betrayed quite like this. The head of a mollusk pokes out from the husk of longing. There's no shame in forgiveness. Enough pillow talk. You are here, and the day burns brighter for it. The fist clenched, pudgy organ just as furious. Mince arguments into a Mobius strip. The moist, socked feet of moving on. Contempt grilled on the barbecue, black market thoughts, shucking organs for soup. How punctured your breath. Survey the space where your lover's furniture once lay, those chalk outlines where the dog huddles. A headache in the airport bar, next to the woman who eats tuna out of a can. Insomnia tonight, rebellion tomorrow. Pulling teeth. And still, they insist, the heart is the measure of success. You're such a lovely, attentive audience. Thank you. It's so funny. I think I'm going to read this poem, even though I wasn't sure. It's a poem that I love. Is it okay to choose favorites in your own book? I don't know. Is that weird? I feel like I wrote it a long time ago. I actually read it at the launch of my very first book. And it hasn't even changed that much. I think maybe that's why I love it, because it was one of those poems that didn't need a whole pile of work. I didn't have to work on it for 8,000 years to get it to work. So anyway, this is a poem about the first time I had an oyster, and it's called Oyster. Drink it slow, says the girl, who takes you on her Vespa along the freeways of Manhattan, who dresses all in black, face a sharp-eyed cat. Oyster juice dribbles down her chin, and she catches it with a napkin. Can you taste it? She asks, and you nod, not at all sure what she means. The ocean, she says. Now close your eyes, and you do. Sip the salty water, granules of the shell roll around in your mouth. Nibble the oyster like touching tongues. Open your eyes. She tilts her head back and pours the fleshy meat down her throat. A bathtub made of marble, legs stretched in lukewarm, the girl sprawled against your solid frame. It is this and every image like it that prevents you from moving forward. You take a cautious bite, pulp against your teeth. The summer in Tofino, the afternoon at Long Beach, your face dry and sunburned. Find shells and smell their insides, musky. The girl's eyes watch your mouth as you chew small, plump bites. You can't bear to swallow something so raw, so full of life. Let's see. I'm going to take you into the ocean a little bit, as I like to do. While I was in Mexico, I learned how to scuba dive, which is it was something I'd always wanted to do. Ever since, this is a little bit of a weird story, but my dentist in Saskatoon has these beautiful underwater photographs of some of the dives that she's done. And I remember being in her office getting a checkup at one point, and they looked very professional photos, and I was admiring them, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I took those." And I was like, "What?" And then she started telling me about her scuba diving experiences, and I must have been a teenager. I keep looking at my dad for confirmation. He's sitting right there. Anyway, and I remember thinking, I want to do that. I want to go into the ocean and see what is there. And so after I had that unfortunate relationship that ended and I went to Mexico, I thought, this is the right time for me to learn how to scuba dive. I need something in my life that is going to introduce me into a whole new world, a new beautiful world. Sorry. So I'm actually going to read this poem. That's the title poem of the book. So the poem is called Buoyancy Control, and of course the book is called Buoyancy Control. And I found this wonderful, perfect quote by Karen Soley. It's a quote that's just starting the poem. So, and she writes, "Studies show your demographic does well to take up hobbies," which I always loved. So I was like, yes, I'm a sad person. I need a hobby. I'm not that sad anymore, but I was. Anyway, this is Buoyancy Control. Deflate. Weighted hips allow you to sink. Bubbles rise to the surface. Descent is an act of control. Swallow. Move through meters of water and calculate. Swallow again. Stop here. Pinch your nose. A forced drowning. Fins erect. I am not a fish. I am not equipped. Jaw jiggle. It's unnatural. Canned air. Drift up a few feet and settle. The birth of each breath is recycled. Dead air finds its way through clefts in the lungs. The evidence trapped. Bubble in the brain. Below, surface direction is lost. The drone of a motor occupies the space where gravity remains a trick question. Don't ask. Instead, note your surroundings. Clear the mask and sing a stream of bubbles to the sky. The instrument used to stay alive constricts your lungs. Swallow. Recycled air. Claustrophobic haze. Think possibilities. Running out of breath, gloom behind your eyes. You are hugged by equipment. This is all the love anyone needs. The last part of the book is kind of divided into two sections. One is sort of more focused on land, and the other is more focused on water. The last section of the book is actually poems that were in the one of my chapbooks called Intertidal Zones, and the poems in Intertidal Zones are this sort of a series that I started writing while I was diving because I became very fascinated with the sea creatures that I was seeing, and just the way they move, the way they interact as sort of these almost alien kind of creatures, and then I started researching them, realizing that I became very fascinated with their the way they reproduce, the way they mate, all kinds of things, and so that's sort of where the chapbook Intertidal Zones came from. So I'm going to read a few pieces from that. This is, not that one, this one. This is Reasons to Choose the Starfish as Your Lover. The starfish is brought home in a Ziploc baggie, a purple bruise, splayed stiff, withered from lack of moisture. The jellyfish dilutes overnight, but the starfish sits taut on the toilet frame for years. It does not yield. On the floor of How Sound, they pile on top of each other, desperate for a feeding, a sheltered spot for regeneration. I read once that all stars are fires, but not all fires are stars. The burgundy hibiscus opens itself towards you with its 5 points. Hold it in your palm. All things take the same shape if you look closely. Some stars exist without oxygen or gravitational pull. Others inhale through submersion, their 5 or 50 legs, rough tongues along the ocean floor. I'm just going to read one more from the book, and then I have a new piece that I'd like to read. So this is Reasons to Choose the Octopus as Your Lover. And I feel like the title's pretty obvious, like who wouldn't want that? 8 tentacles. 8 tentacles. I don't know if you heard me. I just want to clear that up. 100 tiny cups to suck. Morphs to camouflage, i.e. your favorite celebrity. Master of disguise. Warning, a bit of a player. Savvy, smooth talker who keeps you guessing. Maneuvers in tight places. Has no internal or external skeleton. Only the blue-ringed octopus, his Harley, his soft leather jacket against your cheek, is deadly. And reasons not to. There are dreams of others, pressed chests together like tight barnacles, the shredded silence of wet, open mouths. Gulp sweat and warm night air. Swim in a glittery smear of phosphorescent stars. There is always another imperfect fit, one who eats deep-fried Mars bars and says your thighs are chunky, who has 13 lava lamps and struggles to spell words like Christmas and Tucson, who collects barf bags from airplanes. There is love everywhere, everywhere for the taking. So that's the book. I mean, not the whole thing, but, parts of it. I'm just going to read one more piece. This is, so my baby is somewhere out in Ottawa right now with my mom, and I have a 3-year-old at home. So this is for her, and it's called Our Story. Ooh, I almost started crying there. This is the longest I've ever been away from her. Sorry. Our Story. I push my daughter on the swing at Pandora Park and read poems to her. Remember that you once lived, that you were someplace here. That this moment, while unromantic, insignificant, and unimpressive, is still your life. Her legs dangle, hands grip the chains that hold the seat, quiet in thought. The sun warms her neck, my voice, nectar in her ear. I want her to know good poetry, to know on a cellular level how to use language to navigate her surroundings. The tools I can't pass on because language still confounds and thrusts me into self-doubt. Sometimes I cannot love language just to love it. I want to know what it will do for me, how it gives back what I lost through birth and motherhood, a body rapidly fumbling into age. The torture of this body is in the pulp. The cellulite of grief clings to every inbred transformation. It's plausible her story is not only hers, but ours. There is a primal desire to abandon this role and gain the carousel of time back. Mama, come with me. Mama, what are you doing? Mama? Each word punctuated. Words arrange themselves to form our story, subdue us from knowing or understanding how. They do it with presumption, without hesitation, with confrontation, and sometimes with condescension. Though I could listen to her speak for hours, my spine rakes when I imagine hours more of silence, my own solipsistic brain with its ego-flushed banter let loose on the wind with no fight for elbow room or command for dominance. The fight would exist inside as so many voices clamor for attention. This is hardly an issue now. I almost added with us in our world, but that might not be so. Perhaps she is one of those voices, tiny yet stentorian, adjoined with its very own echo. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Attachment parenting at its finest. The inner child, indeed. She likes the poems. Silent in the sun as I read, the breeze tangles her hair into gilded strands, a broken wheat field. In the first year, I had to make up a history of her. Terrifying as it was to hold a complete person and not know them, but still be responsible for their ability to thrive. She was the baby in the sunflower bonnet on the beach in Playa del Carmen, plump feet stuffed into creamy sand like fat fish. Fingers raked the silky surface, sticky granules clung to her thighs. I would pass her to visitors, here, hold her, and admire the smooth mounds of cheeks, the chin like a miniature bum. I couldn't stand to look down while I held her, so I flicked through photos of her face as she slept. Staunch refusal to comprehend how much I had to lose. Even now I can tell it is different, every month that I know her. In her infancy, I squander fantasy, her future, that curiosity of how she will look as a baby, a toddler, a child, how she will boss us around along with her stuffed animals, learn fear when fearlessness gets her in a fix. Back then, I longed for her to grow quickly, surpass that delicate state to a place where my panic would abstain. The panic still comes, but in blips, like radio waves oscillating through the brine of my chest, and now nobody knows that story that is always being rewritten. Those first months, a blur of grief that's far off and trying to die. My cell phone died 20 minutes ago. There is no photographs of my girl on the swing, no documentation. The port in East Van had a chemical explosion, a park mom says. Anyone east of Main and north of First are encouraged to go home immediately. Close all windows. Stay inside until further notice. Good excuse to abandon the swings, a feat that comes with hysterical costs. I carry her small body, racked with sobs at the injustice of leaving. She is not old enough to carry mementos of today, to store as relics in the recesses of her afternoon nap. She fears there's nothing to remember and no one to remember it, and perhaps she is right, the story vanishing as quickly as it was told, and only she and I left, pilferers excavating our narrative remains. Thank you so much for having me.